I was talking to the women, who are also at the yoga teacher training. And I was like, are there any, healers that I could go to on the island? And they referred me to a network spinal analysis chiropractor. I don't even understand exactly how it works. She put me on the table and basically did some touches to my body and asked me questions about my reproductive health, which allowed me to process everything that happened from 16 to 20, all of the shame, the guiltiness, the discomfort, all of that was brought up in the session. And I just felt amazing. And 2 to 3 months after I got home, I got my period back.
Welcome to Unapologetically Woman, the podcast where women come together to share their unfiltered experiences navigating womanhood. Join us as we dive into candid conversations about periods, perimenopause, postpartum bleeding, miscarriages, and more. This is a safe space where we embrace the raw, real, and often unspoken aspects of being a woman. Get ready to be empowered, inspired, and heard. This is Unapologetically Woman. Join us as we sit down with Bridget, speaker, yoga instructor, and co-founder of Visibility on Purpose. In this episode, Bridget opens up about her journey with birth control, how her period stopped for 2 years, and the challenges she faced navigating menstrual health. We dive deep into the stigma surrounding menstrual health, the lack of education on this vital topic, and how nutrition and food choices can play a significant role in balancing hormones. If you ever struggled with irregular cycles, hormonal changes, or just want to learn more about women's health and wellness, this episode is for you. Welcome back, everybody, to Unapologetically Woman. Today, we have Bridget, who is a speaker, yoga instructor, and the co-founder of Visibility on Purpose, a PR and media company helping small business owners be known for the cool things they're building. Yes, thank you so much, Bridget, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about the show and this topic specifically.
Yeah. So Bridget, I was reading your story and we're going to start with Bridget's birth control journey first, you guys. I feel like this has been a very big topic with women with hormones, and I think more women are understanding how hormones play a factor in our everyday aspect and how we need to start acknowledging this. So let's start with, what age did you actually begin your birth control journey and what triggered that? What made you decide, let me get on birth control?
Yeah, I think I got my first period around 15 or 16, so I was a little bit later in the game. And at that time, I also had one of my first serious boyfriends. I'm in high school. My parents are not completely naive to what might be happening when you have a boyfriend in high school. And they were like, that's what you do. Birth control is the next step, conversations with my mom, going to the gynecologist. It's birth control. So I was put on birth control, and it's funny, I haven't really reflected on that part of the story in a long time, but I was on a number of different types of birth control, from the pills to also the NuvaRing, which I had a lot of complications with the NuvaRing.
I remember the NuvaRing. I don't hear about it anymore, to be honest with you, but I remember the NuvaRing. So you were pretty much put on birth control, not really more so for the period aspect. It was more so for the fertility aspect.
Totally. And I feel like my mom just didn't know any better. My mom's actually extremely health conscious too. She could be on the show with us, talking about periods, menstruation at this point. But I think a lot of parents were just doing what they knew to do, which is everyone at that, I'm 30 now, everyone was on birth control. That was literally what you did.
Yeah. So it was kind of like the trend.
Cool.
If you're doing our birth control, it's the trend.
It really was. It really was. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think anything of even having a period or not having a period. I just didn't know anything about women's health. And I feel at that time, it wasn't talked about. This wasn't a thing like it is today.
And you know what's crazy about that? Because I'm 38 and it was the same thing. It really was not talked about like that. And it's okay, we still have to get this to be more common in the school systems at a younger age, getting that incorporated in that aspect. So you're going through, you have your birth control on, you got your period going. Did you have any complications with your period while you were on birth control, or did you not really notice?
I had a lot of problems actually at that time in my life, specifically with like reproductive health in general. Sex was extremely painful, and I didn't know any better. I had no idea that this was supposed to be an extremely pleasurable experience. And, I think this is an important part of the story too, because I was also diagnosed with Lyme disease around the same time. So I was on a lot of antibiotics. I was on a lot of supplements. Like I was on, just many things that impacted other systems of the body too. But at that point in time, like I didn't understand what I do now about how the body is so deeply connected, and like every part connects to the other part, and what you're putting in your body like does matter. So I was having a lot of pain. Like it was just not cool, because this is my first experiences also with like having a boyfriend, and then I'm on birth control, and then I'm like, but why does it hurt?
Wow, that is a very good point that you made about it not being pleasurable, because I feel like I've heard that before with women who have gone on to birth control. All of a sudden sex was not that pleasurable. And like you said, like you think like it's normal, right? You don't actually realize like, hey, this is not supposed to be this way.
Totally. I mean, and I was having like, what's it called? Yeast infections, UTIs. Like I was in and out of the gynecologist frequently, and I'm so glad I can speak on this now, but I did have a lot of shame, during that time of my life from 16 to like 20. That was a challenging period in my own life, not only from being on birth control. Obviously, my hormones were not truly regulated. I wasn't actually getting my real period. I was having other issues health-wise, and all of it together was like the perfect storm to create a lot of problems and health issues in my body.
And that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense, because even when we are stressed as women, our periods are delayed. So that makes perfect sense if your body is under this physical stress. Like you said, you're dealing with the Lyme disease. So it makes perfect sense that it would affect your period. The issue is that we're not educated as women on how that affects our cycle, which is a major part in regulating our energy levels, our moods, our cravings. Like it's a total aspect of our lives. So that makes perfect sense now.
Of course, looking back, we're like, of course. And like, I believe it to be a gift. I truly do, because would I have had the wherewithal and the information and the drive to seek out solutions? Would I have had that? Probably not, if I didn't have those hard times in my teenage years.
And that's a good point too. Like you decided that's when you decided to be empowered, because you can either go either way. You can either succumb to it, and just kind of give up, or you can be like, no, like I'm going to take charge. I'm going to take authority and govern over my body. Like, and it looks like that's what you started to do. You said from 16 to 20, and it's funny you brought up that same feeling a lot of girls have a shame like around their period. And it's like, dude, we have to break that stigma early, because that's 4 to 5 years of shame. Like, in our body, is mainly made up of muscles, right? The uterus is a muscle, and it's like, dude, even the vagina area, like that's a muscle down there. So it's interesting because our body is muscle memory, that's right. So it's like you hold that shame in your body, and it shows up in different ways. And then you said at 21 is where you decided to come off the birth control. And what made you decide, okay, I'm going to start coming off the birth control?
I think at this point, so because I had a lot of health challenges when I was young, like coupled with Lyme disease issues, reproductive issues, discomfort, all this stuff, I started going on this like holistic healing journey. I was like, I'm going to learn everything possible about Ayurveda. Had never heard that. I started getting into my yoga practice. I started understanding that food was so powerful, lifestyle habits. So like I was diving into this. I was, deep in my Google research, like printing out documents to bring to my doctors. Cause I was like, hey, like everything in the body's connected. Like, don't you see? They didn't really get it, which is, a whole other part of a different story. But at that point, I was starting to realize, okay, I want to have children one day. Like, I don't really think I need to be on this birth control. I'll just use protection. Like, I'll start to learn what's going on here, because obviously there's a rhythm to all of this. So I decide to go off birth control, and I lose my period completely for 2 years. And I was like, great. I was in college. I was like, excellent. No worries. Like I didn't understand also that was a problem.
You're like, oh, great. I don't have to worry about bleeding anymore. So, like this is wonderful. And like you said, the lack of understanding, right? That is an essential part of our health as a woman is that our cycle should and needs to be regular for us to know that we are healthy. So that obviously 2 years it didn't come on. That definitely was a sign that something was going on in your body. So 2 years, no period. Then what triggered you then to start like being like, wait, I should be having my period? What was there an incident? Was there an article you read?
So at this point, I was also like deep on my health journey at the same time, but not health as in reproductive health. So I'm getting close to graduating college, and I decide I read oh gosh, what the book is called? It is Skinny Bitch, and it's all about being vegetarian. And the whole thing is like if slaughterhouses had glass windows, we'd all be vegetarian, which like I completely agree. And yoga is very much like comes from India. Many of them really revere animals, the cows especially, and many of them practice ahimsa, which is nonviolence against all beings, which means animals too. And I was devoted, I was a yoga practitioner. I was about to go to Ibiza and do my yoga teacher training, do my Ayurveda. So I was also vegetarian at that point. And it wasn't until I was in Ibiza, and I was the youngest, so I'm like in my early 20s now, and we're at the yoga teacher training, and I'm talking like we just naturally are talking about our health, and I'm talking about how I haven't had a period in 2 years, and many of the women are much older, they have children or even older than that, and they're like, honey, like we need to work on this. And they did a entire ceremony. I get emotional actually thinking about this. They did a ceremony over my body, and it was like basically calling back in the blood and like calling back in my womanhood, and it was like, woo, very, very powerful. That was one thing that happened there. I'll pause and I'll tell you the second one in a moment.
Okay. All right. We're going to let you pause there. Because I can see the emotion like on your, and that's also the beautiful aspect of it. It wasn't just like, oh, honey, this is wrong. And then like they leave you like without knowing what to do. It was like, no, like let's get this back together. Let's get this healing going. And I feel like because you were on that health journey, that it was inevitable that they came in contact with you because you were attracting them to you. So, it's like you attracted that ceremony, that healing for you. So that's absolutely beautiful. I'm really impressed. I'm so glad, they weren't like, oh, that's okay. I'm glad, because that's legit. Like you were at a legit spot.
Yeah, it was perfect place, perfect time. Couldn't have been better.
And that's beautiful. Wow. That is such a major wow. So that is really a major point in your journey of being able to, like you said, like call it back.
Yeah. Yep. And realizing that there is a connection with this. And, so I did an intense yoga teacher training. It was 30 days straight, dawn till dusk of meditating and, practicing and learning and teaching. And while I was in Ibiza, I was talking to the women, who are also at the yoga teacher training. And I was like, are there any, healers that I could go to on the island? And they referred me to a network spinal analysis chiropractor. I don't even understand exactly how it works. She put me on the table and basically like did some touches to my body and asked me questions about my reproductive health, which allowed me to process everything that happened from 16 to 20, all of the shame, the guiltiness, the discomfort, like all of that was brought up in the session. And I just felt amazing. And 2 to 3 months after I got home, I got my period back.
Wow. So like I've never heard, like, I don't even know what you said, network spinal. I'm like,
It's like a chiropractic technique that uses like energy in the body and like the meridian channels. I might be making that up. We should Google this. We need a fact check on this one.
Wow. You saying meridian though is definitely a point, because I do EFT tapping with some of my clients, and we focus on certain meridian points in the body that we go through and tap in order to release like stress and negativity out of the body and reinforce positivity, affirmations, like claiming back into the body through the meridian points. So that is amazing. And I'm actually going to do some more research on that, because I feel like when we hear about chiropractors, we kind of hear it like a from one point of view. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know there was like more specialties when it came to that practice, because like as a dance artist, I don't really go to a chiropractor for that,
Yeah.
like it's mainly, to make sure that, my hips and stuff are still, going, and there's no herniated disc somewhere, I don't really think about, but that is beautiful. Wow, that is a beautiful practice and very healing along your journey. So now, what we're going to do, because Bridget has had this amazing and enlightening breakthrough, we are going to go into a quick break. And right after our commercial break, we're actually going to talk about Bridget's journey of empowerment and how being a vegetarian and the foods were a big factor in regulating her cycle and the different lifestyle changes that she decided to incorporate. So stay tuned. Hey there, fabulous people. If you're loving what you see, don't just watch, be part of the journey. Hit that like button to show some love and subscribe so you never miss out on what's coming next. Go ahead, click that bell icon too, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. Let's grow this community together. Like when my period first started, it would be debilitating. I would have like fainting spells, and I actually did that vegetarian route too. And it really wasn't until I started incorporating meat back into my diet, I feel, that my cramps went like right now I'm craving beef, and I know I'm craving beef because my cycle is about to come on. So it's like that iron that it's craving, and I crave more carbs, and I'm like, dude, like when I started craving more carbs and realizing that my body is burning more sugar around this time, I started thinking about that whole fad with the keto diet. And I'm like, wow, this is a direct target against women's health, because women of all people need carbs, and you really see women who get on that carb diet, and it's like, dude, one, I didn't do it because just within, I'm like, I don't think we should just remove a whole entire food group.
I agree. And all those diets are usually tested on men. That's where they're doing the testing usually, and they're not putting into play that we have women's cycles are just completely different than men's. Just completely different. It just is what it is.
Exactly. So it was like, dude, this is not healthy for us, as women. It's just not. And it took a bit of my ego to get over the vegetarian aspect. To be honest with you.
1,000. I didn't even tell people. We can talk about this, but I didn't even tell my friends, because I was all friends with yogis who put that down. You know what I mean? It's like, how could you? And I'll tell this story. We should go into it. It's a good story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, okay.
Here we go.
Welcome back, everybody, to Unapologetically Woman. I might have some behind the scenes here to show you guys about the conversation we were having right before we jumped into it. We were talking about the food, because I was going into how I started to be able to control my cramps, my nausea, all through food, you guys. Literally, black coffee helped with my nausea, but it also helped with my pain, because coffee, just a tip for you ladies, it contains caffeine, which is a pain reliever. Find it in Tylenol. Look at the back of your Tylenol. You'll see caffeine is actually placed in there. You can get it naturally from black coffee. And black coffee has antioxidants in it, you guys. So it was a big factor in my menstruation health, actually, the types of food that I was consciously consuming. And I want to get back to Bridget's story, because she was talking about being a vegetarian. And I remember that vegetarian route. And I feel like my cramps were worse than ever when trying to incorporate this type of lifestyle. And I would like to know, how did that affect you as a vegetarian? And when did you decide, okay, I have to, I have to break out of this right now? What happened?
Yeah, there are a couple of aspects to this. So I do believe in bioindividuality, and there are some things that are going to be better for other people and some things that are right for the other person. We're not all the same, but it was an interesting time in my life. So at the end of the teacher training, I was like, okay, I need to start eating meat again. That just has to be part of this. It was not even a mental thing. It was my body was telling me, okay, it's time to eat meat. But think about it. At that time, I'm literally surrounded by all yogis. Like all of my friends are yoga teachers. Everyone is vegetarian. Everyone is vegan. So I remember like not talking about eating meat. And at this point, I started using social media and I'd like share some of my recipes and stuff. And I would never talk about eating meat because I was truly embarrassed. I was like, okay, they're going to be like, she doesn't practice ahimsa. This is nonviolence. So that's funny. But the crazy thing is, not crazy, but many of my friends who were vegan are no longer vegan. They started eating meat again. They started making sure it was part of their diet. They got really into the menstrual cycle, really into understanding our rhythms and our seasons and our cycles. And like friends who actually teach about menstruation, like that's their thing, went from vegan to eating meat again. So it is weird how things are shifting again.
That is interesting. And it's interesting that you brought up the shame again. Right?
All right. We got something there for Bridget.
And it was because of other people's perspective of how you should be living your life, and I feel like that comes with a lot of aspects of womanhood, where we're judged about how we should live our life, and I talk about this a lot, the fact that I younger, I was like, no, I don't want children. I decided that in 6th grade, I was like, nope, it's not going to happen. I'm 38. And you know what? I'm still like, nope, it's not going to happen. And at that time, because I'm a girl at that time, I didn't have my period yet. And they would say things like, oh, she'll change her mind when she gets older, because it's expected of me as a woman to live that type of lifestyle in being a mother, because to them, that is my purpose. That's the only reason I'm here, is to bear children, and it's crazy how that is just like a common theme in society of telling others how they should be living their life and shaming others who don't live according to a certain lifestyle, even though it's like, dude, we don't live in the same times as when, when these things were coming up. And it's like, it's not like, like we can't compare ourselves to modern times. And sometimes, vegetarianism or veganism, because it's like it's according to our own body. And I feel like a lot of times people who are very strict on that can be judgmental. Not everyone, but they can be very judgmental. And it's like that's a very recurring theme in society.
That's huge. And I thought about this a lot from like that third view perspective, like watching what's going on in those types of interactions. And people are judgmental against people who won't do it. But it's like that judgment, it's the same judgment on all sides. So why don't we just release that? And like, you do you, I do me. Why just release? Just release it all. And that's not good for our health either. Like those types of heavy, deep, dense emotions, that's not good for us to be moving through our day with that type of feeling in our body. So it was a big awareness shift to acknowledge the fact that I did have some shame around eating meat again. But I love it. My husband and I are like really into getting local sourced good meat. We had an incredible butcher who actually shut down his store, but he knew the farmers. Like he had that connection with the animals. They were, butchered in the most humane way as possible, like sacredness for the animal and the land and the food that they were eating. And I feel that it is the cycle of life. And if we can approach it in that way with more reverence and respect, because we are so disconnected from the food that we eat. So if we have a little bit more connection, we will have more gratitude for what we're putting into our body. And gosh, I feel like the world needs that generally.
Absolutely agree with you. That is an amazing and beautiful point that you just made right there. It's the beautiful cycle of life, right? And having that beautiful connection. And that's what it's about. And I totally agree with you. Detaching, from that, it's detaching from everything. I'm actually still learning that myself. Like when it's detaching from, when you're about to work on a task and you already in your mind, you're projecting how things are going to go, what the outcome will be, before you even finish. And it's like detaching from the future and being present and in the now, and detaching from judgment is that is a big thing that we all need to work on, because it's an egoic mind, you're not actually being present. So to come from that space, it also shows that you as a person need to evolve within.
Mhm.
Like, if you find it very easy to judge someone because of their religious belief, because of
Right.
what they're eating, because of what they're wearing, these are all very superficial, like when you think about it. And it's like, whoa, that controls a lot of society. Now for you, you're like, I started eating meat again and nobody knew.
Absolutely. And I went all in on it. We were like, let's get the Butcher Box subscription. Let's find the local butcher. Let's start to understand this world a little bit more. And I feel like, food and nutrition and just lifestyle in general really did play a role in me reconnecting with my cycle. Actually, at one point, I did a course with a friend who just taught us about the menstrual cycle, what's happening in every single phase of menstruation, from the follicular to luteal to ovulatory to menstruation, like what the different colors of your blood means, all of this. And I feel like this education is just so lacking. And I'm so grateful because I basically shared it with my husband. I was like, hey, babe, you need to understand that women are extremely cyclical. I'm on a 28-day schedule here. There are going to be times when I'm feeling hot AF and I'm going to be like strutting through the house, ovulating and ready to go. And there are going to be other times when I'm feeling everything. And like, I need you to understand that I might be a little bit more tender. And I think if we can not only learn this as women, but also teach our partners and those around us in our life that this is a part of just womanhood in general, like I think our society would appreciate it.
Highly agree. Highly agree. I don't think this is just a woman's education. I think men need to be highly educated because I'm not the same woman I was 2 weeks ago.
Literally.
Like literally, like I'm not. Like, and that's okay because, when I learned what the trigger for me is when I learned that men were on a 24-hour hormonal clock. And then that's when things started sinking in. I was like, oh, 24 hours in a day. I'm like, we're literally working on a man's day. And then I started getting into the lunar calendar and realizing the lunar calendar is more in sync with a woman's body than the calendar we're using now. And I was like, oh, we've been on a man's schedule. It's time to change that. Like, it's time to change that and just respect that I'm on a different calendar than you are. My biological clock is very much different. You peak sexually at 26. I don't peak until my 40s. Okay. Like that, like that's the reality. Like every year I'm getting hornier and hornier and I'm about to embody it. And let's go, babe. Let's go. And that's the beautiful part, right? When you learn these things about your body, because that's when you do become empowered. And I want to know what happened though with the food changes. Did you actually come out and admit, hey, I started incorporating meat into my diet? Like, and what was the response?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was like this huge. Imagine I had like an I'm eating meat party.
Yeah, yeah.
Here we go, world. No, but it was welcomed. No one, it's so funny that we have these projections of what we think people are going to, the assumptions that we have. And I'm normally taught wrong. Like that's normally not the case, which is amazing. So yeah, I started incorporating meat into my diet. I also had some disordered eating from when I was younger. So I noticed that I had a tendency to snack on really, in Ayurveda, we would call these very vata imbalancing foods. So they're cold and they're dry, like chips and crackers and like things that you normally buy like in the inner aisles of the grocery store. I would eat those things and be like, oh, I'm full. And I would never be eating full meals. So I really shifted into eating actual meals instead of snacking, which not only helps my digestion, but started to regulate my period. And now for years, I'm on my 28-day schedule. Like basically how I live is I put food that is as close to nature into my body. Of course, there are going to be moments when I'm imperfect at this. I'm absolutely going to have a lovely pie that my grandmother made. But for the most part, like I'm trying to put real things into my body. And I think nutrition can be really overwhelming for a lot of people. I like to stick to basics, like eat close to nature, eat real foods, limit processed foods, make your own food, start to connect with the food that you're putting into your body, start to dive into maybe gardening or using herbs and spices, because all of those are naturally intended by God to impact our body in the way that we need it.
Highly agree. One of my big things is blueberries. I don't know
Mm,
what it is. And it's funny is that the things that I gravitate to naturally as far as like cuz like you said I make sure like I'm cooking my meats. I'm making sure like I made spaghetti the other day and I hadn't made spaghetti in so long. And it was just like, even just like the aroma and just like even
mhm.
connecting with that, it was so different. And you're right. Like blueberries help me also with my nausea. Like if I'm
Mm,
experiencing nausea and I'm like, maybe it's the antioxidants that
yeah,
are in the blueberries because it really helps me around my menstruation time. And of course, doing research, I find that berries support antioxidants and all these different healths in our body. And I was like, oh, well, this explains it. And I think once we start getting in tune with our body, we start craving what we need to have naturally. Like I literally started craving beef. I was like, I want a cheeseburger. But instead of just getting a cheeseburger, I cooked beef at home. And it was it was a big difference in the way that I felt. And that was like the correlation. It was like, oh, the types of food that I'm putting in is affecting the way my cycle is.
yeah,
And it looks like you started taking that journey bit by bit and understanding, okay, this food is good at this time. This food is good at this time. This food is good at this time, which is why women, we need to be tracking our periods.
yep,
Like even through perimenopause, I learned recently that we can track perimenopause. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. Like we have full control then over what's happening with our bodies. And for you, could you give us an example of things that you would do during different phases of your cycle?
totally. I feel like we kind of started hitting on this right before we came back from the commercial break. I notice I am so much hungrier before I'm about to get my period. Like that week leading up, I need more calories and I can just tell. And as someone who had some disordered eating in the past, to be able to acknowledge that this is part of my cycle, that my body is telling me this for a reason, to get more carbohydrates. So, and I can choose the carbohydrates I put in my body. So maybe instead of like the crackers or the chips that I might have grabbed for, I'll do a sweet potato. I'll go for like the complex carbs. So I think that our body is naturally giving us cues and signals, like you said, but are we open enough to receive them? So right before the period, I know that I need more carbohydrates. I need more calories. When I'm on my period, I actually notice that my hunger levels go down a bit. Like I'm not as hungry at all. Also, when I am ovulating, I have more energy. So I'm also like very much an athlete. I just started some kickboxing at an MMA gym. My husband and I've done like endurance distance runs. We have a 13-mile Spartan next month. So that's intense workouts. And I can tell, right before I'm about to get my bleed, it's not time for me to do the intense workouts. Like my body needs to go into rest state. So I think, it's all about understanding your rhythms and then working with those cycles. And then you just become like in sync, literally. Oh my God, love that band. And you become in sync with your cycle.
That is true. And I love how you just took us through that because it really shows that our menstruation affects all aspects of our lives. You even spoke on the exercise, and which is true. It's like, and the same thing for me, like when it comes to my cycle, my appetite is down. And at
Yeah.
the same time, I'm like, but I know I need to eat. So, I'll make sure I get that protein smoothie and I'll have it ready. And I'll make sure I have that blueberry smoothie and have it ready. And I have my green smoothie, and it's almost as if like the day before I definitely eat. And then the next day when I'm actually like, it's on, like it's not spotting, it's like it's full flow. That's when I'm kind of having like a smoothie kind of day. But then the next day is when I start incorporating back my solid foods. So it's something that my body does gently, it's not like I just go into a complete like, oh, I'm not eating the entire day. It's like, no, my body gently goes into juicing and then it gently like weans off of juicing back into incorporating food, because by that time now I'm just like, yo, let's go. Like my energy
Right.
is starting to pick up, and it's like that. It just starts to go upward. Like it dips and then it's like, okay, now we're starting to go back up again,
I love that. And do you notice too, like before you get your period, you're also just more tired? Like I feel like I could lay a lot more. And as someone who's like very active, I used to be like, why is it happening? Like, am I lazy? Before I understood. I need that rest. Does that happen to you too?
Definitely happens to me too. And that same feeling that something was wrong with me, that I should be more productive, I should be working on this, I have so much to do, was a big factor because I felt like I should keep going, but my energy levels would dip. And I didn't notice that until I started tracking my period. And I was like, man, I was just happy the other day. Now all of a sudden, I don't want to do, like, literally you just wake up and it's like, I don't want to do anything. Like, and it's like, what is going on? And then I will look at the calendar and I'm like, is the full moon about to approach?
Right.
Because so I used to just track it based on the moon cycle because my cycle would always come on the full moon. It was just like that. So I was just like, okay, I'm like, when is the full moon? I'm like, oh, my period is about to start. No wonder my energy is dipping. So it was like you said, accepting that, right? Because that resistance of me, like, why is my energy down? Why can't I do? That's nothing but resistance. But once you start accepting it, it's like, oh, okay, so you know what? Let me focus on mundane tasks, something that doesn't require a lot of brain energy for me because I know that I'm getting a little foggy around this time. Okay, let me make sure that I'm not scheduling anything that requires so much of my attention. Let me just clear out and organize my space around this time. So, so it brings me back to that. So I'm like, okay, before this time, this is my time to organize. This is my time to clean out what I said I was going to clean out. And then by the time when my cycle actually comes on, it's a whole self-care ritual for me. Like I will, like, sometimes I'll go and get that chocolate ice cream with chocolate chips in there. I'm like, I'm going to binge watch Scandal and I'm going to I'm like, this is just my time. Like, this is just me. And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And I think that's the beautiful part and I think that's the main thing of, like, I feel your journey is accepting, because once we accept, that's when we can actually start making those conscious changes.
I think it's all about first the awareness of how our bodies work, and then accepting the rhythms, accepting the cycles, and just being okay with what is, and having gratitude for our cycles. I think it's so powerful that we as women can bleed out the amount that we bleed and still be rock stars in our day and for our families, and just like as a person. I think women are incredible, and to embrace our cycles is such a gift.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to leave it right there at that point. Bridget, before we go, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience in ways that we can promote and support you along your journey?
What would I want people to know? I feel like we hit on all the beautiful points today. Like, love on yourself, especially when you're about to bleed. Understand those rhythms. Share that information with your partner. I mark it in my husband's calendar. I'm like, ovulating, period. Get to know it. They appreciate it.
Wow, that is amazing. Ladies, women, young women, make sure you take advantage of that, because I feel like a lot of conflict does come into relationships when simply because it's not because a man does not care. He just does not know and understand what you are going through. And that can relieve a lot. Getting in tune with your period will affect your relationships, lady, for the better. Okay, like for the better. And Bridget is a clear testimony of that. So we are definitely going to have Bridget's information down in the podcast description if you're listening to this on iTunes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you check out Bridget's website in the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to go into a quick closing and we'll be back with Unapologetically Woman.